So welcome, and thank you again for joining us for the Making College Success a Reality for New York's Foster Youth in Care webinar. Today's presentation is going to be focused on the Foster Youth College Success Initiative. We are doing this presentation in partnership with the New York State Education Department, the New York State Office of Children and Family Services, CUNY, SUNY, the Administration for Children Services. We are going to focus on making sure we're providing the implementation plan, as well as the funding distribution and supports for the 2023 to 2024 academic year. My name is Deidre Nesbeth, and I'm the director for the Fostering Youth Success Alliance. We are housed in the Office of Public Policy at Children's Aid, a multi-service human service organization with the mission of ensuring that children, youth, and families succeed and thrive. Joining me today are several other presenters and advocates, and so I'm going to take a moment to introduce them briefly before we have a brief agenda overview. So first off, we have Sarah Dupree, who has over 20 years of career experience in higher education. Currently, she works for the New York State Education Department in the Office of Post-Secondary Access, Support, and Success as the Associate in Higher Education Opportunity, and serves as the program officer for the Foster Youth College Success Initiative. Kenneth Curtin is program manager at the New York State Office of Children and Family Services, focusing on higher education and transition services initiatives that support youth in care. He is also the Education Training Voucher Coordinator for New York State, which we will hear a bit more about later today, and has more than 10 years of experience in youth development. He's dedicated to ensuring that all youth have the resources and skills they need to successfully transition to adulthood. We'll also hear from Dr. Shirley DePena. Dr. Shirley DePena is the director of the Foster Youth College Success Initiative at CUNY. She also works as an organizational consultant and an adjunct professor at NYS Silver School of Social Work and at Hunter College. Previously, she worked for the Jewish Board for 14 years, first as a social worker and later as an administrator. From SUNY, we'll hear from Clarissa Hartzog. She has a dual role within the college, within the SUNY system, as SUNY's FICE coordinator and also as a campus liaison. As SUNY's FICE coordinator, she works with SED, OCFS, Children's Aid, and the SUNY system, as well as SUNY campuses, to manage funds and execute college success policies and programs that affect all current and former foster youth from SUNY who participate in FICE. We'll also hear from Dylan Tatum, who serves as FICE's Policy and Advocacy Associate. She has an extensive background advocating for the needs of youth with a foster care background through her involvement in organizations such as FISA, Fair Futures, and New Yorkers for Children, to name a few. Sonia Gonzalez is joining us from the Administration for Children's Services. She currently serves as an executive director. She oversees the strengthening and streamlining of educational supports for youth receiving services from ACS. The principal initiative that she oversees is College Choice. And of course, we will hear from one of our student advocates, Nataya Casey. She's currently our lead FISA student advocate and is a rising senior at Siena College. She's an active advocate for our youth with a foster care background, as well as immigrants and refugee populations. She's been recognized for her advocacy accomplishments in many spaces by organizations such as Foster Club and has served as a youth and parent advisory board member. She will kick us off shortly with a few words about how the Foster Youth College Success Initiative has impacted her college experience. So now that you know all of the folks that you'll get to hear from today, we're just going to really quickly go through a little bit of our agenda. So of course, our welcomes and introductions are where we are right now. I'll walk you through a very brief overview of the Foster Youth College Success Initiative. You'll hear more about our program implementation. Then you'll hear a bit about our student eligibility, our identification and consent process, program overviews for the CUNY and SUNY systems, and we also want to make sure you leave here with information about additional resources such as ETV and College Choice that are available to youth with a foster care background as they navigate higher education. Last but not least, we'll leave some time for question and answers to make sure that any information you all need, we're able to get that to you. So in terms of housekeeping, we just want to let folks know everyone is on listen only mode. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature. We'll monitor there for questions and answers and address them at the end of the presentation. This presentation is being recorded, so it will be sent out to participants and will also be available through our website following this presentation. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about the Fostering Youth Success Alliance. So FYSA launched in 2014, really with the goal of promoting responsive policies and programs to offer young people with a foster care background every opportunity to set those higher expectations and achieve their goals. FYSA is housed at Children's Aid, specifically in our Office of Public Policy. We aim to accomplish this goal by collaborating and partnering with city and state agencies, advocates, stakeholders, and of course, young people directly impacted by the foster care system. That can also include parents, caretakers, all those who are interested in addressing system reform. We also try to provide opportunities to support foster youth empowerment and the development of advocacy skills through programs and events. These can include our New York City and New York State Foster Youth Shadow Days. We were very excited to return to in-person this year. And on this slide, you'll see a picture of some of our young people, some of our team, and members of City Council on our New York City Council Shadow Day. We also hold an annual FYSA Advocacy Day at the state capitol to ensure that there's continued support for youth as they pursue their higher education goals and additional supports that they may need. We have our Youth Advocate Program, and we also host online youth forums. More recently, we've been excited to expand our youth forum space to also include Instagram Lives to provide a genuine and youth-focused space for young people to talk about the issues that are most important to them. So, why do we need to make college success a reality for New York's foster youth? When FYSA launched 8 years ago, there were 21 states that were supporting the post-secondary educational success of youth with a foster care background, but New York wasn't one of them. And so we believe that foster youth do deserve every opportunity to thrive, and education is a pathway out of poverty that is a well-recognized and known pathway. 65% of youth in care were completing high school by age 21. 31 to 45% of foster youth enroll in college at some point, and approximately 3 to 11% of students from foster care attain a bachelor's degree. We know that with the proper support, this can change, and these outcomes can continue to improve. So knowing all of these things, FYSA launched its signature program, the Foster Youth College Success Initiative, in 2015. This was done by commissioning 2 reports to make the case of why New York State needs to invest in and support youth with a foster care background, and also working alongside youth advocates to make sure that their needs were being heard directly by elected officials and folks who have the influence to make change. In 2014, that advocacy campaign launched, and in 2015, the Foster Youth College Success Initiative was established in the New York State statute and budget. The college initiative supports current and former youth attending public and private universities across New York State, and to date, over $50 million have been invested in the fund. The program has served approximately 2,000, actually over 2,000 students at over 100 public and private higher education institutions throughout New York State. So now I'd like to hand it over to our policy associate, Dylan Tatum, to talk to us about an important informational resource.
Thanks, Deidre. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to briefly just talk about the college resource guide that is really beneficial for youth with a foster care background, especially as they start and begin their college journey. Inside of the college resource guide, young people and educators alike can really just find helpful tips that youth have shared from their own perspectives while they navigate higher education. And a part of that resource guide, I also wrote about some campus resources that would be helpful for youth with the foster care background as they navigate through college and transition from a 2-year to a 4-year or to a private school. The purpose of the College Resource Guide is really to get our young people just really prepared for what college will look and feel like on their journey, and also just give them an opportunity to really just vocalize what are their concerns and what FISA providers and some of our partners can do as a collective to correct them. You can find the College Resource Guide at FISANewYork.org that we will link inside of the chat. And if you're interested in any particular areas of the resource guide, there is a menu that you can really just narrow down if you want to just learn more about the child welfare system, or if you want to learn about the financial aid process for young people with the foster care background, and then also some tips on what you can do on your college campus to make that process look a little bit easier. So thank you for allowing me to share. Now I will briefly introduce our youth advocate, Natalia, who will share from her perspective what it looks like when young people have supports like FISA poured into them.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes.
We can hear you.
I'm a senior in accounting and at Siena College, and I also have a minor in information system. One of the things that the initiative has helped me was during COVID, when I was really worried that I won't be able to continue my college because I was out of work, and also just having the difficulty with like online learning at that point. But now we're kind of used to it, and everything's works in some ways much better online. One of the things was that when COVID happened and I lost my full-time job at a time, I was really worried I have to stop going to school and kind of find a different job or more hours so that I can pay my bills. And luckily the school contacted me saying that I would be eligible for some fund through this program. And I was really glad, because without FISA fund, I would not be a senior with my last year in college to get my bachelor degree at Siena. Just having that support had really helped me, because a lot of youth always have to struggle between whether they would get a job or go to school. And the whole time I have been able to do both, building on my experiences and also having the support that I need to finish school.
Thank you so much, Natalia, for sharing a little bit with us about what your journey looked like. We have been really thankful and privileged at FISA to witness some parts of that journey, and we're really looking forward to see where that goes. So, as we really just want to, again, thank Natalia for sharing about her experience and the experience that a lot of folks have, right? That needing that support outside of just what financial aid may traditionally offer is something that makes college a reality or not a reality for a lot of youth with a foster care background. So thank you for just bringing light to that, Natalia. Now that we've had the chance to hear from Natalia and her perspective, we want to talk a bit about what the process looks like. So we're going to hand things over to Sarah Dupree at the State Education Department to talk with us a little bit more.
Thank you, Deidre. Thank you for being patient with us as we adjust our camera. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Dupree. I am the program officer here at the State Education Department for the FY CSI grant program. Next to me is my supervisor, Chris Fernando. And Chris is here for moral support and to answer any questions that I might have along the way, because I'm new in my role. I've been in this role for less than a year. I want to thank, first of all, thank you, Deidre, for pulling us all together. And thank you, Nataya, for sharing part of your story. It's lovely for me to see your face and to hear your voice. You have been a name on a spreadsheet. You have been a name in an email. And it's so wonderful for me to actually see your face and hear your voice. So I'm delighted to hear that that this grant has helped you finish up at Siena. That's beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. I'm here to talk a little bit about what the process for securing funds from this grant program looks like. First of all, a quick overview about the office that I work in. I work in the Office of Access, Equity, and Community Engagement Services. We have lots of abbreviations and acronyms at State Ed. Some of the programs that my office works with, you'll see on the left side of the slide, HEOP, Liberty Partnerships, STEP and C-STEP, and My Brother's Keeper. Those are some of the grant programs that we work with and that Chris and I administer in our office. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about the New York State Foster Youth College Success Initiative implementation, a little bit of the nitty-gritty of how the process actually works, because it's not necessarily intuitive or easy to follow. So that's what we're here to talk about today. The purpose of this initiative is to grant access and to expand access to resources for students attending public or private and independent universities across New York State. The funding can be used typically toward direct aid for students. That also includes financial and academic supports so that students can get into, stay in, and successfully graduate from college. So here's a little bit about how funds are appropriated for this grant program. CUNY, it goes to all three sectors, CUNY, SUNY, and the private and independent institutions. Those that host an HEOP, specifically the private colleges, they have to submit an annual application to us, to my office at the State Education Department, to be a recipient of these funds. And then each sector receives an equal amount of funding per student who is identified at that institution. And then each institution makes the decision of how much money to disperse to their eligible students based on those students' needs. So it's based on eligible student need. And on the right side of the slide, you'll see the use of funds. These are the acceptable expenses that the funding can go toward for our eligible students. It can be used for supplemental financial aid, that is, as I mentioned, direct aid to students. It can be used for summer college preparation to help students transitioning into college. It can be used for advisement, tutoring, and academic assistance for those students that's above and beyond typical operations on campus. It can also be applied towards supplemental housing, so room and board, and it can also go toward medical expenses that might not otherwise be covered in the student's health insurance plan. So it really helps fill in the gaps that foster youth students might encounter. We're going to talk next about the several easy steps that colleges and universities can go through to secure this funding each year. So step one is comes from my office, and it actually happened about a week ago. The New York State Education Department sends out a kickoff email to the presidents of all of the institutions across New York State that might be eligible for this funding. To request the establishment of their contact person, their liaison on each campus. So this happened on June 2nd. We are kicking off officially the 2023-24 cycle. You'll see on the lower half of the slide, the sector liaisons and their contact information. So if you are a member of the SUNY system, you'll work with Clarissa, my colleague. If you are part of the CUNY system, you'll work with Dr. Shirley DePena. And if you are a private or independent institution, you can work with either myself or my colleague, Rich McMillan, and you'll see all of our email addresses there as well. Next slide, please. The next step, step two, is to prepare and supply a list of the eligible students who may be enrolling at your campus for this coming fall, the upcoming academic year. So the campus liaisons collect this information, they share it so that we can start our funding calculations, and they also help students submit their consent forms and any other mandatory documentation from new applicants to OCFS. You'll hear from OCFS later on this morning. Those consent forms are required from all new students, new applicants. And hopefully if the student has not sent it to OCFS directly, then the campus liaison can lend a hand and a nudge so that OCFS can verify students' eligibility and then let us know the determination on student eligibility. For students who might be in orphan status, that determination is actually made by campus staff rather than OCFS. And you'll see some instructions at the bottom of this slide, specifically about how campus liaisons should fill in the student roster template. That is, how to indicate how and why students are eligible for foster youth funding. So I'm not going to go through all of those bullets, but those are specific instructions for how to fill out the spreadsheet for returning students and for new students so that they can all be included in our funding calculations. Next slide. Step 3. SUNY, CUNY, and the New York State Education Department will send all of our applicant rosters, that is all of the eligible student rosters that we've collected, and other documentation to OCFS, so OCFS can do that verification of students' eligibility. Then later in the summer, let's say mid-August of this summer, OCFS will return their determinations to us. The campuses are communicating those determinations back out to the students. And then sector liaisons are also going back and forth, if necessary, with any appeals or any questions about those determinations as well. All of this is happening through the summer so that by early fall, we can start our funding calculations. That's the next step. Next slide, please. There you go. In early September, the New York State Education Department will be determining our funding formula. That is, we're going to crunch all the numbers and figure out what the per pupil funding amount will be to each sector and to each campus. Our goal is to provide this information by September 8th. And again, it's essential for us to receive the eligibility determinations so that we know exactly how much the award will be per pupil per campus. Funding is always distributed in equal amounts to CUNY and to SUNY and to the private institutions. And then those campuses determine the actual disbursement to each eligible student. In the fall, we also make sure that we are doing our due diligence and getting all of the approvals necessary at the state level. So we will send the funding calculations to the Division of the Budget, DOB, to let them know and get their approval on the calculations for the upcoming year. Next slide. Okay, step 7, sub-allocations or funding will be transferred over to SUNY and CUNY in the fall, September or October. And then the process of executing contracts begins with all the private institutions. So as you'll see there, SUNY and CUNY receive a sub-allocation of their funding. And then the State Education Department, our contracts administration unit, will begin working on executing contracts with all the private institutions based on the number of eligible foster youth students that they each have. And again, you'll see in the third purple bullet there, individual campuses then determine each student's financial need and actual student award or student disbursement based on the student's need and the determination of eligibility. And then after October, so late fall into spring semester, schools do have the discretion to award remaining foster youth funding after the official program enrollment date if the student is determined to be eligible by OCFS. We know that the process of matriculation is fluid. We know that students who indicate that they may enroll may not actually enroll, and other eligible students may bubble up and become identified later in the academic year. So if that happens, it may still be possible to disperse foster youth funding even after the summertime data reporting deadlines have passed. If you have questions about that, obviously you would talk with your sector liaison or talk with me at our shared email address, which we'll see in just a minute. Next slide, please. Finally, at the end of the year, at the end of the academic year, when all is said and done, my office will ask for a final report or an annual report of how the foster youth students on your campus have done that year. So how are they doing in terms of retention and academics, the GPA, how many credits have they accumulated, what their demographics are. And that, don't worry, you don't need to remember this date. I will nudge you about it next summer. Typically that report will be requested around June 30th or July 1st of each year. There's that shared email address that I mentioned, fosteryouth@nysed.gov. That's my email address. I monitor it daily. So if any of the private or independent institutions have questions about the process, it's not intuitive, it's not necessarily an easy process to follow, feel free to email me there and I'll be very happy to reply to any questions or set up a Zoom chat to make the process as smooth and as easy as I possibly can for you. And I believe that's the end of my slides.
You
I
are
raced right
correct.
through them. So I'm going to toss it back to Deidre.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. We really
You're welcome.
appreciate you walking through that and for all of the effort your team puts in to this process. So just as a reminder, if there are any questions that you all have, please feel free to keep putting them in the Q&A feature. We do see a couple of them coming in. I'm going to take a brief moment to talk to you a little bit about student eligibility for utilizing the Foster Youth College Success Initiative. So on this next screen, you're seeing two terms that you have heard come up a few times already in our time today. One is foster youth and the other is orphan. So for the purposes of the Foster Youth College Success Initiative, a foster youth is defined as a student who's spent any time in foster care after age 13. These include students who have subsequently reunited with their families or were adopted after their 13th birthday. Students who are without lawful immigration status are eligible for FICE consideration, who fall within this category of the law written here. All those students are still eligible for FICE consideration. As a foster youth, if you have been in foster care for any time after age 13, that would make you eligible here. It is also important to note that a young person does not have to have been in foster care within New York State. They can have been in foster care within another state, but it has to have been after age 13. For students who qualify as orphans, students need to have become an orphan after age 13. This may mean that both parents are deceased, and financial aid administrators can use their professional judgment to dependency override an unusual circumstance for students claiming orphan status. If there's ever any support that is needed here, please feel free to reach out and we're happy to help walk you through that. So next, eligible students also must be enrolled in one of these types of higher education institutions, a CUNY, a SUNY, or a private college or university in New York State. As a note about private schools, the school must operate a higher education opportunity program. However, students do not need to be enrolled in that higher education opportunity program to take advantage of the Foster Youth College Success Initiative. So now, I am happy to hand things over to Kenneth Curtin from the New York State Office of Children and Family Services to talk to us a bit more about the student identification and verification of foster care status process.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Deidre. So I'm going to talk about some tips and strategies to ensure that we maximize the amount of students that are applying for the FICE program. So the first thing is gain awareness around eligibility requirements for FISE funds. So that is the first step that all of you are taking right now by joining this webinar. It's to learn as much as you can about the program and about the eligibility so that you can express that to the students to make sure that they apply for these funds. The second thing is to identify eligible foster care students early. Now, this is really important because later on we're going to discuss some other funds that students with foster care experience are eligible for. So if you can identify the students early, you can also inform them of these other programs that are out there. So some ways to identify them is, the first one is include a foster care identification question on the college admissions application. Some schools have been doing this and have found success with having that question on their application so that they can target some of the funding and responses that they have regarding the funding to these youth that attend their school, as well as it helps with if there needs to be a club formed at the school to have a list of students who identify that they have foster care experience. Another way is the financial aid question, and this is really important where I tell all of the adults working with students, please make sure that your students check question 53. There's a question on the FAFSA form that asks if you were ever in foster care after your 13th birthday. If they check that, some schools, they have access to that information, so that is a way to gather that information regarding students. However, in addition, when a student checks that, it also provides them some information related to CHASE in the education training voucher, which is another fund that we're going to talk about that these students are also eligible for. So it's really important that they check these boxes. But the last thing we have here is implement targeted communication efforts to reach identified foster care students. You know, when it comes to the communication and identifying students, we also need to be aware that a lot of students are uncomfortable self-identifying that they were in foster care. So I think when communication goes out, it should be centered around you're collecting this information in order to provide them with resources, to provide them with information to make sure that they successfully get all the funding that they're eligible for and can graduate on time. So definitely when you have to be aware of that when collecting this information, because many students have brought up that it could be a little uncomfortable. You're not sure where that, they're not sure where that information can go. So being upfront with that communication is extremely helpful. So all students who may be eligible for FISE funding must complete a consent form. And I know the consent form has been brought up already on this webinar, but I want to make it clear that who really needs to fill out this consent form. So it's new students applying for FISE funds. They must complete the OCFS consent form. That's how we are able to verify their foster care eligibility that was discussed earlier, meaning that they were in foster care at any time after their 13th birthday. For students who were previously funded, they do not need to complete another consent form unless they change schools. And that's a way for us to notify the new school that this is an eligible student attending your school. But if there's a student that already received FISE funding, already completed the consent form, there's no need for them to complete another one. And some of the information on consent form are things like their name, previous name, which I want to talk about a little bit as well. This is a way that we can also identify that a youth has foster care experience. They must put they had a previous name. That's really helpful to us. Some young people may have been adopted and changed names. So if they have that previous name listed on a consent form, it really does help us when verifying their eligibility. Also, it has the date of birth and consent to share verification of their foster care status. So they need to consent so that we can share this information with SCD or their school. For students who spent time in foster care outside of New York State, they will need to provide documentation. As our systems, we are not able to see students or foster care status if they were not in New York. So some of that documentation, one could be a family court documentation, second could be a documentation from the child's attorney or court-appointed special advocate, or direct verification from a local or state child welfare office. And I believe that is the end of this slide for me.
You are correct. So thank you so much, Ken. Now I am going to hand things over to Dr. Shirley DePena at CUNY to walk us through the program overview there.
Good morning, everyone. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of how the program at CUNY is working and has worked. We try very hard to work with our students in a way that doesn't only provide them with the needed funding, but also provide them with services. So we offer a comprehensive support program that uses a layered approach. We connect with the campuses to see what services are already being provided to students and just build on those services, because our students are also CUNY students first. And so our services and benefits fall within 5 major areas. The first service that we provide our students are individualized intensive case management services. So what we do for our students that we divide our students into what we call affiliated and unaffiliated students. Affiliated students are students that are in a opportunity program or a support program at CUNY. And those are either College Discovery, SEEK, ASAP, or ACE. If those students are in if those students are in one of those program supports, we come in as additional support for them. But if a student is not in any of those programs, we say that they are unaffiliated. And what we do with unaffiliated students is that we connect them automatically to master's level social work interns. And those social work interns work with the students the academic year to connect them to resources, internal and external to CUNY, provide them whatever support that they need, case management service, casework counseling services, sometimes just a shoulder to lean on, problem solving, whatever we can do to provide students with that. With our enhanced academic support services, our students that are unaffiliated, what our social work interns do is they make sure that students are connected to the tutoring on their campus. We make sure, for number 3, that students are connected to the advisement on their campus. Our social work interns will also work with our students to bring up your degree works and let's make sure that you are on track to graduate. If there's something you don't understand, let's go to academic advisement, let's ask those questions, because students that are not in an opportunity program or in a support program don't always have someone to talk things through with them. So we want to make sure that they have that there. Then we also provide community leadership building. We have a foster care FYCSI student group that we meet with every 2 weeks, and we just go over things that, what do they want to see? What do they think will support them best, and how can we do that? And then with the financial support, as indicated before, we provide students with we cover tuition balances, tuition and fees. We cover housing on a CUNY residence hall. We cover, this year, we're covering 100% of the cost of a standard double. We also cover winter sessions, summer sessions, summer housing and winter housing, but also if a student is registered for classes over the summer, we'll cover tuition if financial aid either doesn't cover it all or doesn't cover it at all. We provide students with stipends, educational stipends. Unaffiliated students get a higher amount because they don't have any money coming in from anywhere else that will allow them to use that money for books. We also provide a transportation stipend. We started that this year so that students can have monies to buy a monthly Metro card and get to and from school. As many of you know, we're a large commuter commuter schools. And then this year, we also started to really look at the personal expenses that students have. And we this year have been covering medical expenses, dental expenses, childcare, and rental arrears for students. And we have a process by which we are working with students to get that information to us. And then we work with our financial aid directors and our bursars offices to make sure that the funding can go out to those students so that they can pay for their bills. That is my slide, and I'll turn it back over to my colleagues at SUNY.
Awesome. Clarissa, I am happy to welcome you to chat about SUNY.
Yes, thank you, Deidre. So hello, everyone. And just kind of as you've heard from my colleagues, is that FICE is really looking at how to address the needs of youth in care. And so here are a lot of the challenges that youth in care face, from transitioning out of care, just having that uncertainty, like with stepping into college, like should I identify myself as a foster care student or the other areas, also maybe health-wise, mental health for having physical challenges, or maybe having the financial means to address any of those concerns, naturally financial barriers, even looking at food and housing insecurity. So as shared by Shirley, looking at winter session and how to make sure that students have a place to rest their head, they have the necessary food, and really having just that support that some might be lacking, and really just getting acclimated to student life. Next slide. And so a lot of these things have been, shared already with my colleagues. We're just kind of sharing a couple key points again, is that if the consent form is only needed if it is a new FICE student, or if it's a returner who's transferring from one institution to another, and that's just really for record keeping purposes, just to know where students are. And then, once a student has been verified and deemed eligible, then they don't have to be re-verified. And as Sarah had mentioned, an email was sent out to all the campuses just to inquire who are the expected FICE students that would be, returning, just to kind of get accurate number of the students. And then just making another point when it comes to orphans, and making sure that campuses are getting the necessary documentation to conform the orphan status, and then reaching out to OCFS to say, here are the students who have been deemed an orphan, and then later having them to complete a consent form, again, just for record keeping purposes. And then again, as was shared, making sure whether if it's on the FAFSA and on the TAP as well, that students feel encouraged to complete the were you in foster care, ward of the state, or an orphan, so that they can receive the consent form, and that can help to kind of expedite the process. Next slide. And so just other quick things to mention is that even though we have a deadline, we still can deem, or OCFS can still confirm if a student is eligible for FICE funds. So don't allow the deadline to be a deterrent. We still can, throughout the academic year, deem a student eligible. And then one quick thing to note when it comes to SUNY, we have some students who are EOP or non-EOP. Students are still eligible to receive that FICE funds regardless if they are part of EOP or not. And this other couple, things to mention that was shared with SED is that the award amount is still being determined at this point, and that's just based upon us finding out who were those returners, who were those students who are going to be eligible, and then later SED is able to come up with a formula to determine, okay, for each sector, each area, here is the amount that's going to be given to each student. And then one other quick point, important point to mention for our community colleges is that we really need to know the remaining FICE funds that are on that campus, so we then can issue out additional funding that's needed for the academic year. So just making a point to mention that. And that for whatever reason, if there's a student who has some extenuating circumstances and it is beyond the max award, just to reach out to me, share that particular situation, and we can see, case by case, how we can, support that student depending on the situation. Next slide. Okay. And then this is, again, just kind of the key areas that with the FICE funds, how it can be applied. As again, what was shared, tuition and fees, books, transportation, housing. And again, one of the things that we're really trying to do this year in particular is just early outreach as far as for housing intercession. I know students naturally kind of start to think about it as it gets closer, but really, my goal and our, goal collectively is just to, when it comes to winter or even spring break intercession needs, to do early outreach so that students can have what they need and they don't have to have that, heightened concern, as the winter break arises. And then kind of as what was shared, personal expenses, looking at that, seeing how to support students. And the same thing goes with, medical expenses as well. And I think that is it for me.
You are correct. Thank you so much, Clarissa. So now we want to take a moment to hear about a few other resources that are available to youth as they navigate their higher education. So to first talk to us about the education training voucher, I'm going to hand things back over to Kenneth Curry.
Thank you, teacher. So I will be discussing the education training voucher, which is another fund out there for youth with foster care experience. This fund provides up to $5,000 a year, and this is an academic school year for students with foster care experience. And this fund, in addition to being able to be used for college, it can be used for vocational programs. That's what makes ETV a little unique, is that it can cover some of those vocational programs if it's an accredited institution. Next slide, please. So to be made eligible for ETV, a student can be either a current foster care youth, a youth who left foster care at 14 and older, so that's a bit different from FICE, which is 13 and older. So for ETV, it's 14 and older. However, if a youth was adopted or entered a kinship guardianship agreement, they must have left at the age of 16 and older. So they must have been adopted at 16 or older, or entered a kinship guardianship agreement at 16 or older to be eligible for ETV. A youth must apply for ETV before reaching age 21, and they can remain eligible up until age 23. And that's also a difference. With FICE, there is no age cap. So for FICE, an individual could be 30 years old and still be made eligible for the FICE program. For ETV, it's up until the age 23, as long as they apply before their 21st birthday. In addition, a juvenile delinquent in the custody of OCFS placed in a non-secure OCFS-operated facility of 25 beds or fewer, or on aftercare status, they're also eligible for ETV. For this eligibility, we would need a verification letter from their worker to verify that information. Next slide, please. So funding is limited. It's available on a first come, first served basis. Students must reapply each academic year starting July 1st. Again, that's a difference. As I mentioned before, with FICE, if you're in your same school, already received FICE, you do not need to do another consent form. With ETV, we must remind our students that starting July 1st, they must reapply for ETV. And new applications are accepted throughout the year. A student may qualify for ETV funding for up to 5 years. And a student must be enrolled in an accredited institution to receive ETV. And I will put my email in the chat. So if anyone has any questions about the ECP program or where to find the application, please feel free to reach out to me. Back to you, Deidre.
Thank you so much, Ken. So now we are going to hand things over to Sonia Gonzalez from ACS to talk with us a little bit more about another resource, which is College Choice.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here and continue the conversation on additional benefits specific to foster youth in care with the Administration for Children's Services in New York City. The College Choice program launched in October of 2022, and it makes significant enhancements to several of the programs that we had already and or you may be familiar with, such as the Dorm Project, the Fostering College Success Stipend Program, and our College Room and Board program, where ACS continued supporting our aged out youth who remain enrolled in school. And we supported them with college room and board payments after the application of financial aid. The purpose of enhancing and developing the College Choice program was so that we could give students more flexibility and options around the types of supports they need while attending college, including where they can live. Next slide. When our students apply for the College Choice program, they are already matriculated in college. They've already enrolled, they've already registered, they've already applied for financial aid. When they apply to the College Choice program, they can apply to receive several benefits. Some apply to receive all, some apply to receive some based on their unique circumstance. The program offers one-on-one coaching, academic tutoring. We provide financial support with college housing payments, whether a student is living on campus in the dorm affiliated with the college or university they attend, or off campus in off-campus private housing. We support with tuition and fee payments after financial aid funds have been applied. We also offer our students a $60 per day stipend. That funding is circulated to our students' foster care agencies, and the funding is distributed by the foster care agencies to the students. The foster care agencies and the students work together to determine what is the best way to allocate that $60 a day stipend. Some allocate it on a monthly basis and send it to students in one payment, and some do it on like a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks. We also expanded our program to offer our graduates, students who earn an associate's degree or bachelor's degree, with the continuation of the $60 a day post-grad stipend for up to 6 months after graduation. Next slide. Our eligibility requirements are similar to many of what you've heard already. Our students need to be in foster care with ACS upon enrollment into our program. We do realize that our students, they may enter our program as a youth in foster care, and while they are in college, they age out. Those students, so long as they were admitted and enrolled in the program in foster care, they can continue to receive the benefits via College Choice, so long as they apply for benefits each semester. Students have to be enrolled in a 2 or 4 year accredited college or university, have to maintain a 2.0, minimum 2.0 or above GPA, enroll as a full-time student, and have shown proof of completing all financial aid applications. Next slide. We require, during the College Choice application process, we do ask students to upload specific documentation into their College Choice application portal. We've designed the College Choice application to sort of mirror a college application where there are standard general questions, and then students can upload specific enrollment documentation, such as their enrollment verification letter, their bursar bill, if they are a continuing college student, their college transcript, the schedule for that semester, their university calendar. For students who decide to live off campus in private housing, we do ask them to upload a signed lease that outlines the terms and fees of their lease for the academic year. And then for students who have graduated and applying for the postgraduate stipend, we do ask them to upload their final transcript and a copy of their diploma. Next slide. So for New York City students who are in college in New York City, whether it be CUNY, whether it be a private college or university, we do offer specific options for those students, and you'll see it on the slide here. Students who are attending college in New York City, if your college campus has a dorm affiliated, you can decide to live on campus in that dorm, or you can choose from one of these options. I will say that the CUNY options at the Towers and the Summit, those are specific to students who attend a CUNY school, but other options such as International House, our 92Y, Outpost Club, those locations allow students to attend any college throughout New York City. And if they choose to live in one of these locations, they would apply for that housing location as well. All of these housing options, they are familiar with our program. And we do ask when students apply for one of these housing options based on your need, you include that you are a participant of the ACS College Choice Program, so that they are aware, and they do not charge students individual fees for housing, and they coordinate directly with our ACS College Choice unit. This is just the link to our application. Our application opens every prior to the start of the fall semester, as well as the spring semester. We do ask students to apply on a semester basis because things change semester to semester, and we just want to keep a close touch on the needs of our students, especially around the funding support that we provide. Next slide. And this is our contact information. You can reach us at these emails if you have additional questions, if you need additional support.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for walking us through that overview of college choice. We really appreciate it. So we did promise some time to answer any questions that you all have, and we've been seeing questions come in the chat in the Q&A feature. Some of those questions have been answered, but before we hop into answering a few more, I do want to hand things over to Sarah, who has a couple more clarifying points.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deidre. Yeah, I just wanted to offer reiteration of a couple of points that I think might be helpful to our colleagues in the field. This is something that Clarissa mentioned a moment ago, and I wanted to, oh, I'm all blurry. That's good. That's my best. That's my best angle. The completely blurry angle is the best. I wanted to offer a couple of reiterations of something that Clarissa mentioned that applies also for the private and independent colleges as well. We do have a deadline of July 14th for that student roster. That is the students who are coming in or coming back to your institution for the upcoming academic year. But we know that things change, and we know that that can be fluid. So yes, July 14th is the deadline. If you don't have a firm determination by then, that's okay. You should still include students on your roster that you have an inkling may be eligible for foster youth funding, because it's better to be safe than sorry. You know, we do want to try to fund those students if at all possible, but if they're not included on the roster, you know, then we don't have any way to keep track of them. So, July 14th is the deadline, but even if it's after the 14th, when you identify or get students verified, that's okay. We will still do everything we can to accommodate them and to work with them. I think that was it. Chris, was there anything else? Any other additional clarifications?
No, just know that we'll work with you as long as we can to try and identify eligible students. We know that this is, again, as Sarah mentioned, it's a fluid process, but we really want to make sure that students receive these funds, if at all possible, when they're eligible.
Very good. That was it from me, Deidre. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for walking us through that. So we do have some questions that have come in. Our panelists have been answering a lot of those questions right in the Q&A feature, but there are a couple that are here. So I will read some of them out, and I believe Dylan may also have a few that have come in. So this one, it may be best for a combination of perhaps SED and OCFS. What was the effective date for financial aid administrators to document and approve funding? Oh, it disappeared.
Yeah,
Funding.
Deidre, I think I just answered that one.
Got it.
July 14th is the ideal deadline, but if it happens after that, that's okay. Again, if liaisons have any inkling that a student might be eligible, it's best to include them on the roster for us. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Thank you. We have another question that is in regard to orphan status. Can we consider a student an orphan if one parent is deceased and they have never knew the other parent or haven't had contact with them? Ken, I don't know if you have a take on that you might want to share from OCFS's perspective.
Hi there. So in regards to orphan status, that is based on the school's discretion. So OCFS, we only verify foster care status. But some schools may make that determination if the student is unable to locate their other parent. So that is based on the school's discretion, but I can also pass that to SED if they have anything further to add.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ken. I believe that question is actually part of our FAQs. SED has worked in collaboration with OCFS and Children's Aid and FISA to generate an FAQ document about eligibility, because there are so many different questions of this nature that come up. So I believe the FAQ document is posted on our website, on the Foster Youth website. If not, anybody with that question can write to me at fosteryouth@nysed.gov, and I can share that FAQ document with you. And if necessary, I will call up my friend Ken on the phone and we'll collaborate on the answer before I put anything in writing.
Thank you both for that answer. We did have a question that Shirley, I know you were able to answer around if the foster care question is currently on the CUNY app. Currently, it is not. However, we do want to remind folks that young people are applying for all of their financial aid options. And so on the TAP application, on their FAFSA, young people are able to indicate this. And on the TAP application, when a young person indicates that they do have a foster care background, that will help them automatically be linked to that consent form or the Foster Youth College Success Initiative program. We have another question in regards to the orphan status. So can we determine eligibility for orphans along with documentation without having to submit a consent form? I see Sarah, it might be typing. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Hi there. Yes, I'm typing and talking and listening at the same time. Yeah, the consent form is encouraged and requested by our colleagues at OCFS, even for students who may be in orphan status. That makes it easier for everybody to keep track of students who are deemed to be eligible. But the final determination of orphancy or orphan status is made by the folks on campus. It's not made by OCFS. Patty, I hope that answered your question.
Our next question, what is the process for an eligible applicant who recently transferred to another institution?
I think the best place to start is with the sector liaison. So if you're Elvis, if you represent a SUNY or a CUNY, you would talk with your sector liaison. If you're from a private institution, you can drop me a line at fosteryouth@nysed.gov. And I can go over the process with you for a private or independent institution.
Thank you for that, Sarah. We got a question a little while ago. If we have a student who is Seneca and utilize the tribal family services, can we verify using the same OCFS form? Ken, I know you have a take there on making sure they do fill out that form. I just want to make sure I'm reiterating that correctly.
Yes, that's correct. They should fill out the form and we can review that case.
Awesome. In terms of unanswered questions, I see you may know about students who have completed the consent form that we are not aware of if they went straight through HESC. Can we get a list of students for our campus? This is from an anonymous attendee. I would ask Ken, Sarah, I know that consent form is needed to be able to release information. So in this regard, if you do have a question, especially since this is from an anonymous attendee, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to our folks here to support you in answering this.
Yeah, I would say for this particular question, we don't receive, and I don't believe the IHEs receive, a list of possibly eligible students for their campus. I think that would probably be a question for HESC or OCFS, or when in doubt, contact your sector liaison and we'll see what information we can get to you. This is a really good question though, because it does get to the heart of how to identify potentially eligible students. And we know that that's a really gray and complicated facet of administering this grant. When in doubt, reach out to your sector liaison and we'll see what information that we can provide to you.
And Sarah, before you, and if I'm reading the question correctly, you may know about a student who has completed a consent form, but you're not aware that they completed the consent form, right? So what will happen is if OCFS gets a consent form, when they send the master list back to SED and also to the SUNY and CUNY sector liaisons, they will list that student's name on there. So even if you weren't aware that a student submitted a consent form, OCFS will add their name under your college, right? We'll list this student with the college, and then we'll be able to explore it that way.
Right. So yeah, when in doubt, ask, you can reach out to your sector liaison and we can check the most recent list that we've received from OCFS to say, oh, okay, yep, I see that student from your campus listed on the roster as eligible. So they will be included for funding. So when in doubt, reach out to us and we will check our records for you.
Can I just also add, just from a CUNY perspective, just because I agree with Sarah that the other thing that may not have been this question, but is important is how do we identify students? I think students are getting identified, much more easily now than they were when the program first started. But the other thing that I would think about, I would encourage everybody to think about is still identifying students. So one of the things that we have also always used are CUNY first queries. So campuses obviously are able to develop their own queries, and you can develop a query that pulls any student that answered the question on the FAFSA in the affirmative, the question that asks about foster care and orphan status. That will give you a list of students that answered affirmatively, and that's your potential list of students. Now I say potential, and it's not a fail-safe because that's what I've done. I've developed a query that allows me to look at all students at all campuses that answered affirmatively to the foster care question. It is not a fail-safe only because some students also answer that question if they've been in guardianships, and that those students are currently not eligible for the program. So I will work for CUNY, and I do work to full lists of students that answered that question in the affirmative. I send them an email, I send them the consent form, And I'm in touch with them at every campus in that way. But campuses also, if they would like to do that, can also do the same thing, have a query developed that asks, pulls students that answered that question in the affirmative and reach out to those students as well, encouraging them to complete the consent form.
Thank you so much, Shirley, for that additional information. I see a question of what about undocumented students that can't do a FAFSA?
Undocumented students can still be eligible for foster youth funding. So even if they can't do a FAFSA, they can still do a consent form to OCFS, and OCFS can still make that determination for them.
There you go.
Thank you, Sarah.
We
And
love the dreamers. Dreamers can still be eligible.
And Ken is nodding along.
Yes, and for undocumented youth in care in New York City, they also are eligible for the college choice benefits as well.
Thank you, Sonia. I do think we have answered all of the other questions that I see in the Q&A, but Dylan, want to ask you if there are any questions you see that we've missed, because I know you've been keeping track.
We're all on track.
Okay. Well, if that is the case, we would, another question may have just come in. Sonia, this one's for you. With the college choice program, do youth age out when it comes to attending the program? And does the program include master's degrees?
So the program offers, so as long as youth enter the program in foster care, when youth age out of care and they remain eligible for the benefits, they are eligible to continue receiving college choice benefits, if that makes sense. So we do not dismiss students from college choice when they age out of care. And no, the program does not support master degrees. But we do have students who enroll in undergraduate degrees where there's a dual degree program. So they're in college for up to 5 years and they're earning a dual bachelor's and master's. And we do have a student that we've supported in that specific area.
Thank you, Sonia. We have one more question here. What if a student isn't a dreamer and they don't have DACA? Is DACA required for undocumented students?
Chris and I are pondering this one, and we think that might be a question for our colleagues at HESC. We are not sure.
If you, this came from an anonymous attendee, if you are comfortable sharing your name, we are happy to follow up. We can, with you specifically, we can also include this in the general Q&A that we send out regardless, so that you're able to get that answer. Are there any funds available for graduate programs? Currently, FICE and College Choice Program are not available for graduate programs, but I do believe that ETV is.
Yes, ETV can cover graduate school programs as long as the individual applied for ETV before they're 21, and it goes up into age 23. So if they meet that, we can fund graduate school master programs.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, I don't see any further questions at this time, so we'll take one more brief pause to see if any others do come in. But please know that any questions that have been answered in the Q&A feature and questions that have been answered live as well, we will send out a Q&A document to share all of that information with folks. We'll also send out the recording to the slides and presentation, as well as the materials. And with that, we are very happy to just thank you for spending some time with us, learning more about how to best support youth with a foster care background through their college process and maximizing their funding. For our young people who have graduated and have been on their FICE and college journeys so far, we do have a virtual graduation celebration to honor those students tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. on Zoom. We will also be following up with the link to this celebration. Please feel free to share this with any graduates you may know, whether they're finishing their associates, their bachelor's degree, and feel free to join and celebrate with us as well. And with that, we are just thankful for you spending the time with us. Please be on the lookout for a follow-up email sent with the materials for the webinar. And please feel free to access the college resource guide at any time or reach out to any of the folks on this call to support you and best supporting your students. Thank you so much and have a great day.